Hello, welcome to episode 145 of the Epic Film Challenge 2, 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die, 1920s Within Our Gates, directed by Micheaux. I had already seen this film a couple of years ago, specifically for this series, and I just never made the video. And the same can be said of other films around that period a couple of years ago, where I was watching films from the book, but I never got around to making the video. And it came to my attention that I'd watched that film and never made the video for it, and I was thinking maybe I can just skim through the film again, get the gist of it, and then do the review. And I thought, no, do you know what, I want to sit down and give it its due time and watch it from start to finish once again. And it was a forgettable film in some aspects. Some things did stand out in my mind, but the overall film I couldn't quite recall. So I watched it all again, and the first time I watched it was on archive.org, where there was some kind of what they call it, public domain version was available for free to watch, and it was, low quality, bad music, didn't really seem to serve the film all that much. But this time I watched it on Netflix. It's now available on Netflix as part of the, I forget the exact title of it, but it's the Pioneers of African American Filmmaking. And it's a set that Kino put out in the States with lots of films by black directors and so on that were historically important and have been preserved. And so I watched it on Netflix, and it looked a lot better than it was the last time I saw it, and also the music was different. And just a quick note on the music that they put for the Kino release. I thought it was really good. Like it reminded me of The Last of Us a couple of times, the kind of instruments that were used and things like that. It didn't quite fit the images on screen so well, but it was good music. But then there was like this kind of like beat dropping in, and it said at the beginning, music by so and so, also known as DJ something or another. So a DJ put this together, and when the beats start dropping in, it's like I don't know. I'm not sure if that fits, but. All that aside, the film itself, Within Our Gates, a very important film, the oldest surviving feature-length film directed by a black filmmaker in Micheaux, and it's a film that really tackles racism head-on in 1920, and that just to me seems like it would be unheard of, and it's really impressive to me because of that, because of clearly the balls that this director must have had to make this film. And also being a black filmmaker, I'm sure that he wasn't afforded the same amount of money and budget that other films were around that time. I don't know the logistics of the film's production, how it was produced and things like that, but you can tell that not much has gone into this film. I mean, there are, scenes set at a school, but you just see a room of a guy at a desk, all these corners seem to have been cut. And the film itself isn't really that well directed. I mean, it's very kind of static and uninteresting visually for the most part. There's a couple of moments where it kind of dabbles with something that could be a bit interesting visually, but it's mainly about this story. And what I think is impressive about the film is just purely the content. And again, even the acting doesn't seem that good at times, and it's mainly a black cast, and all the white characters pretty much are racist characters, except for one. And I like that. I like that it didn't paint white people as one thing. Coming from a black filmmaking team. They showed the good side as well, and they showed like each side of the spectrum, because you had this elderly rich white woman who wants to help our main character, who's called Sylvia. She's works at a school as a teacher, and she's trying to raise money to keep the school going because they have all these poor kids coming in who want to be educated. And they haven't got the money to sustain that, but the head of the school hasn't got the heart to turn them away, so they're losing money and they're going to go under. So Sylvia goes off, she goes up north to kind of get some backing from someone to fund this school. And then the dilemma of whether or not black people should be educated because they're not smart enough actually comes up in the film. And this elderly white woman who wants to help Sylvia and help the school, she has a friend who is just a complete racist and says you shouldn't do this because black people, they're not worth it, and I know these things. And so you get this absolutely horrifying racism in the film, and you can really kind of look at something like Birth of a Nation from 5 years before this, and then a film like this, and it seems like a reactionary movie, and apparently that wasn't the case. But nonetheless, Micheaux wanted to highlight some of these issues that were coming out of the First World War with racism and black people's place in America at the time. And I don't know nearly enough about all of that stuff, but I know enough within my own moral code that just stuff like that is just so wrong. And towards the climax of this film, you get this extended flashback. I think that's where I don't really like the film that much is the way that it's presented. It starts with this subplot with Sylvia and her fiance and her friend kind of getting jealous and trying to sabotage the relationship, and then it moves on to the story about the school, and then that kind of gets wrapped up, and then there's another side plot with another character who's a crook. And then we get this like 20-minute like flashback to end the movie, and it felt weird. I don't think it's a very good film in its construction, but I admire the content, and I admire the balls that it must have taken to make a film like this in 1920 and release it. And it wasn't a film that was well received, widespread. It was controversial. People sought to cut the film. Scenes were lopped out of the film. They were seen as controversial, and I think now we only have about 80% of the film, because some of it has just been, for a long time this film was lost, and then they found a Spanish print under a different title, and so they've reconstructed it and put it all back together again, but there's still a few things missing. But I can't see how a few scenes would kind of correct the problems that I think the film has, in that it's not very engaging dramatically, I don't think. And I read the review in the book, and I was really interested, because this film was really highly regarded, and I read all the good reviews about it, people praising how brilliant it is and things, and I just couldn't quite see it myself. Again, the content, the message is very important. The film itself is very important. It's this kind of, it's something that shouldn't exist back then, but by all accounts, a black filmmaker making a film and having an all-black cast, well, mostly, and how most of the white characters are portrayed very negatively. And this is probably the most powerful part of the film, where you see Sylvia's backstory, and spoilers I guess, but I can't see many people going to watch this film, but towards the end we hear Sylvia's backstory told by her friend or someone else, and we see the whole thing in full, and we see her family get lynched, and that's kind of cut between a scene of her fighting off a white man trying to rape her. And so it is really shining a spotlight on that, because the kind of thing that was put out there back in those days was that the black man would rape the white woman, and that's why that was one of the things that was used against them. And this was showing a white man trying to rape a black woman, while intercutting it with this mass mob lynching of this black family. And you see the reasoning behind it is completely unfounded and false. And it's a really unsettling scene, and then it ends with an even more unsettling note that just takes it to a whole other level, which I won't spoil here. But again, I admire the balls of it. I admire the gumption of this guy to make this film and have a story like this and to put it out there at that time. It was an incredibly bold move, I think. And in the book, the review in the book, it says something like brilliant narrative storytelling, something like that. I just disagree. I really do. I don't think it's a great film in terms of the technical aspects. It's more, again, just the content, and I'm repeating myself at this point. So, is it a film you should see before you die? I'm going to say yes, because I think historically it's important. It's not a very good film, but it's not a bad film either. I mean, you can follow it, and I think the story gets a bit convoluted and kind of ahead of itself. It should just focus on Sylvia more primarily, I think. And it kind of does, but I just feel like there was too many subplots introduced that didn't need to be there. But I think that it's important to watch it and kind of understand where the whole racism thing was at that point, and how different this film was, and how bold it was. And in watching this film, I would hope that people would then go and read up more about this kind of thing, which is what I've been doing, and looking into the history of it and stuff like that, and looking at this guy, Oscar Micheaux, and how ahead of his time he was in terms of putting that message out there, and being bold about it, and saying what he thinks is the truth about these issues, and that it's not just this, it's that as well. And I mean, one of the characters in the film, a black character, is a complete crook. So it's not like he's painting black people as saints either. And there's a really interesting subplot that I'm glad that was in the film, actually. This preacher character called Old Ned, and he preaches to the black people in this church or this meeting hall that we need to like bow down to the white people, and we need to do this and that. And he's basically telling the black people to bow down to this oppression of the white people. And we see him go to meet with two white guys, and he's like, oh yeah, I make sure that I tell all my friends that we know our place, and you guys are at the top. And you just think, wow, this guy is so deluded, and then he leaves the room, and the smile that's on his face that has been so animated throughout the film just drops, and he looks so serious, and you hear his inner monologue where he's saying, like, man, I'm going to go to hell for this, but I want to eat. You know, and that is another powerful moment of the film, I think, because his scenes are so comical, and then it really brings it down to, so that there are good devices in the film that I think work and give you that powerful message, but the overall construction of the film I didn't really enjoy that much, and I've watched it twice now, so I've given it its time, I think. I don't think I'd watch it again. I'd maybe go and watch that scene again that's so great towards the end with the intercutting. But it is what it is. But I do think it's a film you should see before you die, because it's historically important and it's something that I'm quite passionate about. So I definitely think it has its merit for what it is. And sometimes with these films in the book, you know, it doesn't really matter what I think, whether it should be a film you see before you die or not. But I want to judge it not only on my enjoyment, but also just kind of thinking what it could lead to. You know, it could lead to you looking into these things and researching these things, and maybe learning more that you'd be glad to learn about. Because again, I watch these films and I think, man, I know nothing about this stuff, which is horrible in history, but it's worth knowing. And it kind of gives you that push. I remember being in history class in school. I just wasn't interested. I wasn't interested. I mean, I'd be like, yeah, that's horrible, but, you know, I want to go home and play Sega, you know. And it makes me ashamed of that in a way. But I was a kid, I suppose, and I don't really hold myself too accountable to that. But now I think I should know these things, and it kind of ignites a bit of passion within me to go and find out more about this kind of stuff. And to learn what the significance is between the North and the South, which is so prevalent in The Birth of a Nation as well as this film. So there you go, that's my thoughts on Within Our Gates, which apparently is a line from a D.W. Griffith film. It might even be from The Birth of a Nation, I'm not sure. But I'm not sure whether the reactionary story of Within Our Gates being a reaction to The Birth of a Nation is entirely untrue. But there you go, that's my thoughts on Within Our Gates. Thank you for watching, leave your thoughts down below, and I'll see you in the next one.